in our session today, we're going to be talking about Agile marketing, which I know has been around for a little bit. For some people, it's not something that you know too much about. And so hopefully this session here is going to give you a really good introduction to Agile marketing. And so you can learn how to become a more forward-thinking Agile marketer. I am going to run through who I am if you don't know me already, but my name is Peck, and why I talk about Agile marketing. This is probably the 4th webinar that we've done in this series while we've been all working in COVID-19. Now, what I do want to say is that we've got a little bit of housekeeping. Who doesn't love a bit of housekeeping? So you can ask questions at any time, and please do. The session itself will probably take about 30 minutes, maybe a bit more, depends exactly what we get into. But there is a Q&A box, so please do put any questions that you have in there. Love to hear what you've got to say, and we'll answer those at the end. And then there will be an on-demand version of this available on our website, internationalbunch.com, so do go there. As I mentioned, it'll be about 30 minutes in total for the session, but we may talk about things in the Q&A. So I want to keep this webinar a bit shorter. Sometimes they go on for 60 minutes. And so now I'm going to go through the agenda. All very exciting stuff. Okay, so who am I? Well, who am I? We're going to cover that in a moment. I'm going to cover what is Agile marketing, if it's something that you've heard about or not. We're going to talk about the types of Agile marketing. We're going to talk about waterfall marketing versus Agile. Now, if you work in a traditional sense, you'll know what you'll be doing waterfall marketing effectively, and also what that looks like visually. Now, why would you change to Agile? Effective time planning, which is really important, is something that we also covered in our remote working webinar, the first one that we did in this series. And then we're going to look at Scrum in practice as one of the examples of working Agile. And then we're going to touch on what people say, and then questions. Okay, so there's me. It's a picture of me, a little bit blurry, but there is a picture of me. So who am I? So my name's Peck, and I'm the Managing Director of the International Bunch. I've been working in the academic publishing industry for many, many years now. I've been doing marketing for about 20 years. And I became involved more in Agile marketing probably in about 2016, so about 4 years ago, and I've loved it ever since. And really, it's not about how you're working as per se, though we're going to touch on quite a bit of that here. It's more to do with your mindset and how you apply that not just to your work but to your life. And historically, people often think about Agile in terms of working in a development sense, and this is all about how to use it in a marketing sense. Now, I'm a certified Scrum Master, and Scrum is a type of doing Agile, and I've worked with a number of publishers and other organizations in terms of talking through them with Agile, introducing Agile ways of working, and really helping to their organizations and their marketing teams to adopt a more Agile way of working. Okay, so what is Agile marketing, I hear you say? And remember, please do ask me any questions that you have throughout this session, because I can see that there are a number of you here, and I will answer them at the end. If you're anything like me, I'll forget what I was going to ask, so do pop it in the box. Okay, so what is Agile marketing? Agile marketing is an approach that basically allows you to identify those projects which are high priority, those that are specifically aligned to your business's objectives. What are the projects that you really need to get done that are the most important to make sure that you achieve your ultimate goals or your ultimate objectives? And this is where your collective efforts are going to be focused. And when I say collective, this is, say, for example, if you work in a team, because you can do Agile marketing by yourself, or you can do it in a team environment. So Agile marketing allows you to adapt quickly to what the business needs you to do and market changes. As we know, in our markets that we work in, things often change and very quickly. And an agile marketing team works collaboratively together. And that's something that I'm going to emphasize as a really strong and very important work when you come to agile marketing. It's about working together, but it's also about being able to measure the impact and the effectiveness of the work that you're doing to ensure that you have continuous improvement and that you're ultimately delivering the best value to your customers, whether your customers are internal, so stakeholders inside your business, or whether they're your external customers. So I want to talk to you about the types of agile marketing. There have been a number of these. You may know some of these, but I'm just going to touch on them. So one of them is Kanban. Now Kanban is very visual. It's a framework that promotes incremental and continuous changes to an existing project, campaign, or process. So basically with Kanban, you work through a list of tasks by priority, but without a time frame. Now, the thing is with working agile, it can be frustrating for certain parts of the business. If you've ever worked with a development team, for example, that work in a very agile way, you can say, well, when are you going to do this platform development? Oh, well, you know, we've got this planned into sprint 30. And yeah, we're looking to release that maybe at the end of November, but that might change and it might be at the end of the year or even the new year. And you're like, really? Working agile is about making sure that you are working on the projects that are the most priority for the business in terms of what the business needs, and that changes. So Kanban is mentioned working through a list of tasks by priority, but without giving a specific time frame. And that can be quite frustrating for stakeholders who are very time frame driven. Lean is another one, and it's basically about eliminating waste, shared learning, making decisions as late as possible, and delivering fast. So literally stripping everything back. Scrum, which is the area that I mentioned that I'm certified in as a Scrum Master. So this includes, is a little bit more structured because it has roles, responsibilities, and you have scheduled meetings. The team can also share knowledge and experiences and lessons learned, and you work in something called sprints. And I'm going to cover this in a moment because this presentation does cover more in terms of the Scrum side. And I find that Scrum works great. Now, when you're trained in Scrum, they say you should never deviate away from what we're teaching you. You have to run it like this. Well, we're working Agile, right? And I feel that when you work Agile, you should be being flexible, and Scrum doesn't always fit how you need it to work, especially when you're looking into at a publishing business or an intermediary like an aggregator. You want to have something that is going to be flexible, but we all like a bit of structure sometimes. So the roles and responsibilities really helps, especially managing expectations with your stakeholders in the business. Scrumban, I could ask a little poll here and ask you to suggest, do you know what that is? So Scrumban is basically just a combination of Scrum and Kanban. You could use all of these, and you could come up with something that's custom hybrid, specific to how you want it to work. You could start off with working with something and then realize, no, actually we want to adapt Kanban to work with us in a more innovative way for how we want to work. So custom hybrid tends to be a way that I certainly go and my team work, and also with those that I've worked who started with a certain way of working using one of these, but then have gone on to make it more custom hybrid to what they want, because we're agile, right? It's about having a flexible mindset. It's about adjusting to change quickly and easily and just getting on with what's the most important thing to do next. So I want to talk here about waterfall versus agile. Now, if you imagine we've been working in a very traditional way of marketing for many years, very rigid structure, planning. So for example, through the years, I've had to start doing planning 3 months before the new the new financial year, and ensure that our plans are there, ready to go. They've been approved by the various different stakeholders, and then they're ready to be implemented in the new fiscal. So great, I do that on a yearly basis. I'll then look at my measurement of my campaigns throughout the year that's just gone, things I want to change. Maybe I've got some lessons learned from my colleagues. So I look at that really more on an annual basis, and I'll touch base on maybe a quarterly basis just to see where I'm tracking and anything I need to change. But I pretty much got my performance objectives set up. I pretty much know what I'm going to be working on throughout the year, and then my stakeholders, they know what I'm going to be working on. I'm effectively creating the different elements of my campaigns or my plan. I'm deploying it, and then I'm analyzing it a bit more towards the end. Well, when you it's a little bit more flexible. So what happens is that it's a process that allows you to adapt easily. So you still have some structure and you still have planning, but it's not as rigid. It's not, say, on an annual basis. It's more on an annual basis in the respect that you would talk about, say, right, these are the business's objectives for the year. And this is what I feel the main projects that we need to be doing. And I'm not going to go into the level of detail, but I feel these are the main projects that we need to be doing to support those objectives of the business. And then you plan per quarter. So you say, right, these are the ones that we've identified are the projects that we're definitely going to be working on this quarter. Now let's look at saying, what are we actually going to do for these? And you do it on a month by month basis. And every month, say, for example, if you have something called a sprint, so imagine like you're running along, I've just done my back in, so probably me doing that isn't the best thing right now, but you're running along and you're sprinting along, you're doing all your various different things, you're keeping yourself really busy. Well, that's what a sprint is. It's an allocated amount of time where you're doing all your various different tasks. But, you know, like many of us, you're doing it at speed because there's a lot going on and, you know, you're basically working. So this is very much about doing things in a smaller time frame, and then looking at the measurements in terms of how effective was that work, and then changing it quickly for the next time. And a sprint could be a week, could be 2 weeks, could be 3 weeks, could be a month. And most of this presentation I'm going to be talking to you refers to it on a monthly basis. So in this cycle, you have something called a retrospective and you have sprint planning. So at the beginning of every sprint, that time when you're going to be dedicated to saying, this is what I'm going to be working on in that month, then that's your sprint planning time. Your sprint retrospective is when you've gone through your sprint cycle for that month, you've worked on all the things that you said that you're going to, and you're going to look back and say, right, did I get all the things done that I said I was going to do? Okay, and how did it go? Was I blocked with anything? So that's what sprint retrospective is. And then you have touch bases with your team throughout that time on a regular basis, which are called stand-ups. Now, the reason that they're called stand-ups is because if you've ever joined a stand-up from a development side before Agile marketing really began to be adopted, it's where you actually go into a room and you stand up. You don't get comfortable. You literally have a 15-minute catch up with your team and say, what did I work on yesterday? What am I working on today? And do I have any blockers? Everybody has the opportunity to give a very brief update following those 3 rules. This is Scrum I'm talking about here as a way of working to give you an idea. Everyone has the opportunity to say, and then discussions and questions around blockers and all that kind of thing happens at the end if there's time. But it's literally time boxing and saying, we're just going to touch base for 15 minutes. Okay, so Waterfall is much more rigid, usually done on an annual basis, and then that's what you're doing for the rest of the year. What happens if your company acquires another company? The landscape changes, the objectives of the business change. What if you're acquired by another company? Your objectives are going to change. So it's hard then to apply your plan when the business is changing, and it changes, right? So you have to be agile. So that's why you need a more flexible way of working, planning on a more regular basis and adjusting as and when you need to. Okay, so this is just to put it into visual context. Imagine that the green is the actual landscape and my pink there is the vision of where I want to be. So if I'm doing my annual planning and I'm working in a waterfall sense or a traditional sense, ultimately where I end up in a year's time, you know, my vision is not where the actual landscape is. However, when you were agile, things change, you get acquired, you acquire a company, people leave, there's restructure in the business. something else comes along that's much more priority than what you're already working on. Happens all the time. And so actually it really changes. So you end up being in the actual landscape that you're in. And that's what's really important about working Agile. So why change to Agile? Now, there are a number of things I want to cover here. And the first one being adaptability. And it's about being able to adapt to what your business needs, and transparency. So it's about being really transparent, and you can use a number of project tools. In fact, we have a webinar next week which touches on Trello and Asana to give you an idea of how to work collaboratively together as teams, not just while you're working virtually, as many of us are, but also if you're in the office with each other. It's still a really great tool, and it allows transparency across teams throughout the world. So it's about ensuring that everybody knows who's working on what. You've got clear ideas of ownership, how the projects are performing, how you're performing. Is there anything you need to adjust? It really helps you in terms of that process. The speed at which you're doing things, understanding better how you're working and how actually you can deliver work, and then the predictability of what you're working on. So those are the 5 key areas that I would say this is why it's important for you to change, not just to an Agile way of working, but also to an Agile mindset. So you have a closer alignment to your business objectives, to the vision of the business, especially if that changes, and also the people that you work with, which is incredibly important. And also innovation is at the key. So it's not just about following the trends of everyone else, but it's about ensuring that you are innovating in what you're doing. And you've got that ability to be empowered to innovate. There's also greater communication and collaboration inside your team that you're in, your direct team, but also outside of the marketing team. So if you're working with sales, for example, or product or editorial, or whatever your business structure is, it's ensuring that you've got that really close and good collaboration with your colleagues in other teams. And that's something that I've certainly seen significantly, can't say the word, feels like it should be Friday, significantly improved with a number of my clients in terms of much better communication channels with those other stakeholders that they didn't really talk to or deal with much before. Also, what's really great that comes out of this is that there's an increased skill sharing, and the team performance and motivation increases. And that's something that's a real positive about this. Now, not everyone adopts Agile the same way, and some people need a little bit more help because, hey, we're all unique and we all learn differently, and we need to be sympathetic to that. So there is the need to ensure that we're all being supportive and helping each other. It also means that you can improve the speed and the responsiveness of the work that you're doing. So that means that people, your stakeholders, tend to be a lot happier. But it does mean that you are working on the projects that are the highest priority first. And so what may happen is that what might be important or a priority for someone else isn't actually a priority in the grand scheme of things when you align it to your business objectives. And that's a really great way of being able to push back. Fluid data analysis also means that you can have more effective and efficient ways of working. So what you're doing is more impactful. And then also increased customer involvement. So of course, this could be getting your external audience more involved in what you're doing and the feedback channels that you have, but also this is about your internal audience. And many people forget and don't realize that the internal customers are absolutely essential. They are people that really need to be bought into what you're doing. And it really depends on your structure, whether you're a sales-led organization, an editorial-led organization, a marketing-led organization. You really need to be collaborating and working and really engaging with your customers. Okay, so I touched on this on the remote working webinar that we did at the beginning of this whole webinar series. But I'm bringing this up again because it's so important. Now, effective time planning When I do training around Agile, people will say to me, I don't know what to prioritize. I'm really stuck. I've got too much work to do. Now, these quotes that are kind of come up on the screen here are actual quotes that I've had from staff at one of my customers. So I have too much work to do and not enough time. And I'm sure that as I say these, at least one of them is going to resonate with you. I'm worried, I'm failing. I know I felt that over my career, and all of these resonate with me throughout my career. I'm always being asked to do things ASAP. Megan, one of my team, probably feels that right now because it's me. I don't know what to prioritize. That's very common, especially it can be common right at the beginning of this process when we teach people about Agile marketing and help them to start adopting it. When my director emails me, when I email Megan, I action it straight away. Yeah, she's pretty good at that, Megan. I feel overwhelmed. Yeah. And you know what? At this situation we're in at the moment, this pandemic, COVID-19, wow. Does that make people feel even more overwhelmed than normal? You know, I've done, this is, I mentioned before, this is my 4th webinar that we've done in 4 weeks. And I did some training with some librarians, and I did some training with some marketing staff from a big publisher recently. And I asked them how they were feeling. And we did a word cloud, and it was amazing to see how common both industries were feeling, but also the amount of negative words that were coming up in terms of how demotivated and stressed and just overwhelmed, and overwhelmed became quite a big word in the cloud, that people were feeling. But actually there were lots of really great positive words as well. So I know that a lot of this is probably going to resonate with you at the moment, unless of course in the UK you've been furloughed, which means that you're not effectively doing your work at the moment, and but you're still getting part payment, or maybe if you're lucky getting full payment because your company is subsidizing the rest. And so you might be taking advantage of this time and say, I don't feel overwhelmed, I feel good. Okay, so when we think about effective time planning, what I want you to consider is think about all the time that you have to work in a year, 100% of that time. Doesn't matter if you're full-time, part-time, whatever. 100% of that time that you've got to work. Well, forget 25% of it, because that's going to be on holiday. That's going to be if you were sick, appointments, that kind of thing. Forget another 25%. And this isn't a scientific equation that I've given you here. This is like a rough guide, but it will give you a good idea. So the other 25%, you know, that could be around you writing your performance objectives, you doing admin, you raising POs, you know, whatever it may be, team meetings. So that is 50% of your working time gone. So that means that you've got 50% of your actual working time to spend doing work. And you need to be really mindful of that when you're thinking, what can I actually achieve and do in a month? What really is realistic? Because often we will try and do too much. And when we work with companies about adopting Agile marketing at the beginning, what we find is, and this happens so much, and it's not a problem, it's more of a learning curve, as long as people learn, that people will say, yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah, I'll do that when you're in your planning meeting. Oh, do you know, I've always wanted to make a video. Yeah, I'll do that. And then they take on this list of tasks, and it's actually the Scrum Master's responsibility to say, do you really think you can do all that, to help to guide them? And they go, yeah, I can. And then when you come to the end of the month and then something else popped up, or, you know, they weren't very well, or they had a holiday, and then they suddenly realized that they could not achieve and do the work that they thought that they were going to do. So imagine you had 20 days of working. So use this equation here, you only end up with 10 full days of actually being able to do work, you know. So it's about learning what is realistic. So I've talked a bit about Scrum before as an example, because it's an easy one for me. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you an example of it in practice here. So you have a team. It's very much about teams. It's about collaboration. So you have a Scrum team working together. Now they have these funny names, Scrum Master. I mean, what an odd name. A product owner and Scrum members. Basically, you have a team. You have a project lead, someone who's the main point of contact for the projects that have been worked on inside that team. And then you've got the person, the Scrum Master, who's effectively the team lead. They're running that team. They're ensuring that everything's going on as usual, and everything is being managed and everyone's well supported. A product owner may be someone who is actually has a specific interest in terms of they own a specific project in the group. And so, or maybe if you're doing product marketing, this is where a product owner would play. Now, I've put a little crown on here because I'm symbolizing here that that person is running their own project. Now, you can have a team, and you could say have a team of 7, and you could only have 3 projects. So you only need 3 actual project owners, 3 point of contacts. Those point of contacts are the people that the stakeholders will go to say what's happening about this project. But the whole team can work across these 3 different projects. You don't have to work in just one area. And what that means is that if you have a team with a really varied skill set, people can get involved in lots of different projects rather than just having to work on the same project all the time, which gives people more variety, and it means that they're more motivated in the work that they're doing. So the Scrum Master is effectively your project lead, and then you've got the person who's running the project, and then you've got the Scrum team members. So you of course have other stakeholders around in that structure there. So we've got line managers. Now line managers tend to sit outside the team. They'd only be involved in terms of decision making if they were part of the workflow in a project. Really everything to do with those projects that have been worked on inside that team happen inside that team, and the support that you need is inside that team. It's just like working in a project team, a big project team. But so you've got someone that's leading the team, and then you've got all the different people working on the various projects. What you find is a line manager will be there for more of the side with performance objectives, working with whoever that person in the Scrum team has been most actively involved with. Maybe they've even owned their own project, so you bring in the Scrum Master and say, how did they do? You know, let's talk about their objectives. Let's have that person in the performance meeting. So you'll find that the Scrum Master and the line manager work really well together. But in terms of when you're looking to take your holiday, you go to your line manager to speak to them about that. But I don't want to get into too much detail. I do want to kind of keep this light. And I know I'm at 30 minutes, so I am going to run a little bit over, and I hope you'll forgive me for that. You do have lots of other various different stakeholders. So if you imagine as a marketer, when you're running a campaign, you don't just have the people that are in your team that may be helping or supporting with the campaign. Maybe you have an editor that you're working with. Maybe it's your marketing director. Maybe you have someone in the other part of the business that you're working with. So you'll probably have other stakeholders that are working with you with your project. And then there may actually be other teams. So sometimes what you find with Scrum teams is that you can have a Scrum team that's maybe a Scrum team that has a specific objective, like customer advocacy. And then you could have another Scrum team that specifically does the campaigns, maybe more like a demand generation. And then you could have another Scrum team which just does journals marketing. It all depends. You structure your Scrum teams around your business objectives, and you can specifically align them to ensure that they are delivering projects that your objectives need you to, but you can put the Scrum teams effectively into themes, into like subject areas, or cluster the projects together so it really makes sense. Or author marketing, for example. So you end up with this team with a number of people with various different roles. You've got a Scrum Master who has a project because they've got their crown. You've got a number of other people in here. They've got crowns because they own a project inside that team. And then you have others who don't own any projects, but they're actively involved in those projects on an ongoing basis. So if you looked at a structure of a Scrum team, you could have, say, for example, the head of a department. And then you would have say, a number of different scrums inside that now. So it is a bit like having sub-departments inside a main marketing department, but it's a more effective way of working. And what happens is that on a quarterly basis, people may move around in between Scrum teams, because maybe a Scrum team has got a big video project, say, for example, in customer advocacy that's happening, that they need someone who's currently in another Scrum team in this quarter. So it also gives people the ability to move around in different Scrum teams if you want. And some people won't want to move around into different Scrum teams. They'll want to stay where they are. So the great thing about this process is it works with people's individual needs and how they like to work. But this kind of just gives you a bit of a visual in terms of a Scrum structure. And so you still have your line managers in there, but they just may be in a Scrum team. And sometimes you'll find that some departments will have traditional way of working, and they'll have like journal marketers, for example, and people doing books marketing, or both. And then they'll have Scrum teams that are specifically delivering programs related to what they want to do on a more holistic level across all the journals, rather than being subject specific or journal specific. So you, for example, could look at a customer advocacy campaign about having a survey that goes out on a regular basis to authors who are in a specific type part of the workflow, the publishing workflow, to find out how they're getting on in that specific workflow, and then they can analyze that as well. So you have those groups which are specifically looking at certain subjects or focus. I think focus is a better word to use. So in terms of, well, how does it work when we want to have a, how do we even start this up? You know, if I create a Scrum team and we've got, you know, Scrum Master, someone who's leading on the team, and they're not a line manager effectively, they're just leading the team, ensuring the projects are moving forward and they're touching base with everyone and they're setting up the meetings. How do I ensure that the projects and the tasks get done that I expect to get done? Well, basically what happens is that you have a list of tasks that you need to do. And I mentioned earlier, I'm going to talk here on a monthly basis. So we list and we prioritize those tasks. What are the things that really need to get done to ensure that everything else is moving forward, that the highest priority tasks that need to be done? And they could be date dependent, they could be dependent because something's going to be launched. There could be a lot of different variables that we need to consider why something has a priority that it has. So we then list those and we say, these are the ones that we're going to be using for this month. This is what I'm going to say, I'm going to be working on these tasks in the next month. And you know what? The only way that I'm not going to be working on those tasks is if something comes along that's such high priority that it knocks one of those other tasks or even two of those tasks off my list. So then you run your sprint. I mean, I'll do that gently so I don't hurt my back. But you run your sprint and you're basically working in a 2 to 4 week period, and you are ensuring that you're working on those specific tasks. So everyone knows what you're working on. You use a project management tool like Trello, Asana, or Planner in Teams. And you basically say, right, these are the tasks that I'm working on. My stakeholders know what I'm going to be delivering in this time frame. And that is all that I'm delivering. And if someone else comes along and says, well, you know, can you do this? Actually, I can't. We're going to put that on the list for me to think about and consider and prioritize in the next sprint. And that's an effective way of doing pushback as well and managing people's expectations. And in that time, you have the stand-ups. So you have regular touch bases, whether it's daily, whether it's 2 times a week, whether it's once a week, but you're regularly keeping in touch with your team. And as I mentioned before, you're touching base to say, what have I just been working on? What am I working on right now? And have I got anything that's blocking me? And everyone goes through and gives their quick update. And as I mentioned, any questions or discussions, keep that to the end. So everybody gets that opportunity in 15 minutes. To do that, and then you can drop off and leave people on a call having a chat. Also, when you work with teams who are in locations all over the world, you could have 2 stand-ups a week. And when you're dealing with like Asia Pacific and America, because the time zones are so different, you could have Asia Pacific and Europe together in 1 week, in the first part of the week, and then the second instance that you do in that week could be EMEA and North America, Canada. And you can record the sessions as well, so you're ensuring that the others can hear what was discussed and get an update themselves. But I'm not going to go into that level of detail, because you can record and we write notes as well. We try and keep it as simplified as possible. At the end of that sprint, we have a retrospective. Now that is incredibly important, because that's talking about, as a team, we have a meeting to say, right, what worked well? What would we change for next time? And then have an open feedback and be really candid with each other, and then talk through ideas that we may have to change things for next time. And it's about being more efficient and effective working together. So then you have sprint planning, and with the sprint planning, as soon as that meeting has ended, so hopefully you heard me say that, then you actually start the sprint straight away. The other sprint, once you do the sprint retrospective, that's been and gone, like done. And then you move into sprint planning. If you've got any tasks that you didn't get done in the sprint that's just been and gone, that's when you put them back in your list and say, right, are they still a priority now based on the other work I've got to do, and should I be doing them? And it's also a great time for the it's a great opportunity for the Scrum Master, who is effectively leading that team, to support them and say, right, you know, how are you getting on? I've noticed that you keep putting that task in the same sprint, but you're never getting it done. Do you really need to do it? So it's something good as a way to encourage and support. Okay, right. So what people say, right, we're nearly coming to the end of the session here. So we've got some nice stats here just to show how important Agile has actually been in Agile marketing. But 98% of organizations say that they have experienced success with an Agile project, which is always a positive. It'd be pretty bad if 98% that they hadn't. 93% said adopting an Agile approach helped them switch gear quickly now or yesterday. And then also 93% said Agile marketing helped them improve the speed at which they did marketing. And that's incredibly important when we think about the speed of delivery. Okay, so do we have any questions from those that have come back in? I'm just going to check my Q&A. Okay. You can see I've got some that have come through here as well. Right. Okay, so how can you apply the principles of Agile marketing to a remote working team structure? Okay, so actually Agile marketing works incredibly well when it comes to a remote working team structure, especially when you use project management tools like Asana or Trello or Planner, so that you've got the transparency there of what everyone is working on. But also it's important that you continue to have those regular catch-ups, and those with a Scrum way of working, it's more structured. So the really good thing is that you've got those meetings, you've got that touching base with each other. And as I talked about, when you have a number of global teams working together all across the world, you don't want those in Asia Pacific, for example, to always be attending these sessions which are in their evening, which often happens. So having that more flexible approach and giving them the opportunity to attend one, and then your American colleagues to attend the other, and your European colleagues attending both, or Indian, or wherever you are in the world, then that really, really helps in that respect of adopting Agile way of working. Is Agile marketing useful for smaller businesses as well as larger ones? So we have a team of 3 staff, and then we have about 30 freelancers that we work with. We really need to work in an Agile way. As a consultancy, we have a number of projects that are ongoing, and so we've got a good idea of what work there is. But then we also have some projects that come along which are very time sensitive, which happens, you know, quite a bit. So we need to make sure that we're able to reprioritize our task list and ensure that we're able to deliver that if it's of a higher priority. And we have a way of categorizing that. So it doesn't matter whether it's you working on your own or whether you work in a really big team. An agile way of working isn't just about how you work, but it's about your mindset as well. It's about having a more flexible approach to how you're doing something. Do you know, if something blows up and something changes, it's okay. You know, there's always a better way of doing it. And, you know, I could think about, because I have a 2.5-year-old who constantly makes me watch Frozen 2, I could say, you know, you do the next right thing. If you've watched Frozen 2, you'll know what I'm talking about. And she has a doll that says that to me as well. Okay, how important is agile marketing when writing a long-term marketing strategy? So businesses will predominantly work in a way, certainly larger businesses, because smaller businesses tend to be more agile, but businesses will certainly work in a way that they have set their objectives for the year. So for example, if you work in a publishing organization, it may be that you want to engage with an X percentage of early career researchers in that year. And there's a number of different ways you can do that. And though, of course, you know, that might change in time, but that's quite a solid one. So when you're looking at your long-term strategy, you can have an idea of where you want to be and your objectives, but it's the things that you do to achieve that, and they really change. So you can have long-term goals, you can have a 5-year plan, but of course that might change as well. And it's important that you are flexible. And yeah, I think that, yeah, that one's just a comment for me, so that's great. Okay, so if you don't have any other questions, thank you so much for attending. And for those of you that came back, I will be sending this out as a recording. I will check this recording because I'm sure it's broken, and I'll re-record a nice fresh one for you and try and keep it a bit more to time, and then you'll get an email from me. I'll also send you a link to a nice infographic that we created. And if there's anything specific that you're looking for, please do let me know. If you want us to do webinars in any specific area, then, you know, just get in touch. And also we've got a really good YouTube series that we started, which is marketing hints and tips as well. So make sure you go to our channel and subscribe. So thank you so much for joining us, and it's been a pleasure. And just 2 more to go, and you never know, that person that's joined us for 3 so far, I might even see you there. But thanks so much and take care.